Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Juggernaut, and, well, this is a video I wanted to make for approximately, I don't know, 5-6 years maybe or so, but I never really had the courage, for multiple reasons. One, it's kind of a controversial take, and the other is I get the feeling that if you say something like this, pretty much it's in the title, right? If you say something like this, then you're gonna get treated as, oh, it's the boomers trying to tell us how back in their day everything was good and, so on and so forth. Which is, let's just say, a little bit discouraged on the internet. And I feel like it didn't really have much of a point. I was preaching to the choir. I was complaining about I was going to complain about the state of the video gaming industry, where there isn't really an alternative or a solution. I was just commenting on how things are, and that doesn't really seem all that productive. But, well, I saw a video. Well, actually, I saw a couple of videos. I saw initially one by Downward Thrust, which is quite an interesting name, but I saw a video by this YouTube individual, and I really liked it. And his video was titled Modern Gaming Sucks, or Modern Video Games Suck. One of the two. I'll put the link to this and a couple of other videos that I mentioned throughout my take on this, I suppose, in the description down below, so you can check it out and, give those guys some love. Tell them I sent you. I'm just kidding. It's I'm probably going to be linking videos with people that have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of subscribers, but the point is still there, right? They make some good points, and I found quite a few really good videos on the topic, and that led me to think, well, hold on, I've been thinking, with different emphasis on different things, but generally speaking, and at the core, I've been thinking the exact same thing for years now. I just never really wanted to face the music, right? I never really wanted to admit it, and I never really wanted to stand by what I said and then sort of defend my position and get on with it. Speaking of, I should probably get on with the video. So, TLDR, this is going to be my response to the plethora of videos on YouTube titled Modern Video Games Suck. And yes, to a large extent, I agree with those videos. And there's also quite a few claiming otherwise, that this is all nonsense and that we're all idiots for thinking so, and there's a couple of respectful ones that say, no, modern video games are the best that video games have ever been, and so on and so forth. Well, considering there is some point of contention there, in that those are two completely opposite opinions, I thought I might contribute something to the overall discussion, and I was going to make this video a couple of days ago, and then I did start recording it, and then I dove a little bit deeper, and I was like, okay, this is going to take a little bit more preparation. So here we are a couple of days later. I've watched a few more videos, and now I'm going to get into the topic. Fair warning, this is going to be a lengthy video, so if you really want to listen to the whole thing, and I'm going to discuss the modern video game economy, microtransactions, and how the industry has evolved, and how the evolution of said industry changed the video game format, how video games have changed, how certain arts and certain ideas in video gaming have been lost forever, basically, due to the fact that it's a mass, multi-billion-dollar industry now and stuff like that. There's quite a lot to cover, but it is going to be a lengthy video, so if you want to put it on as a podcast or something, that's kind of how I would recommend it. The game in the background is Vampire Survivors, in case you're just curious. Also, bear with me if I do stutter, repeat myself, or lose my train of thought or something. I haven't slept in about 2 days, and my master thesis is keeping me really, really busy. Not that I'm making excuses for myself. I could have written a proper script and recorded this video and made it a little bit more concise, probably by the end of the day, but I'm dead tired, and I really just want to get it over with and put it out there without having to work on it for, a week. Or more than probably like another week, right? More than I have already. So, with the 78th disclaimer out of the way, let's get to it. Modern video gaming sucks. Well, Most videos titled like this, and believe me, there are quite a few. You can type it in the Google, the YouTube search bar, and yeah, you will find a plethora of videos with extremely popular channels, with less popular channels, all sorts of takes on this entire idea. But the one thing that a lot of them have in common is that they'll title the video like that, and then they'll immediately begin with a disclaimer, and they'll go, well, when I say modern video games, I don't mean all video games, and certainly when I say they suck, I don't mean that they're not fun and that they're horrible and that you shouldn't play them, and yada yada yada, and, you know, by the end of this long stream of consciousness before the video actually began, you end up arriving to the point that the person in question doesn't think that modern video games suck at all, and that the title was just clickbait. At least that's the case for most of them. Some of them really do stand by it and do really justify the title. Some of them, it's just clickbait. And I understand, right? I'm a YouTuber myself, you want to get people's attention, you want them to click on your video, and a 3-paragraph long, elaborate, abstract of your point is not exactly something you can do in a YouTube title, so you need to condense it and make it a little bit more dramatic. I get that. But, that said, I do think that those videos like that, like I said, the one from Downward Thrust and Asmongold also did a video similar to that. When it comes to Asmongold, I really do like his content. He's a great guy. However, his sphere, I say, of expertise, don't know how much I could call it expertise in a matter like this, but like the topics that he deals with, I'm not particularly interested in, and by that I mean he mostly talks about multiplayer games, generally in his like videos and his content, MOBAs, multiplayer games in general, and that's I'm not big on multiplayer games, right? I play a few occasionally. But generally speaking, I'm much more of a strategy game, RPG, single-player kind of guy, so I leave that to him, and you can go and check out his videos if you're more interested on the whole pay-to-win and free-to-play dynamic, and how the economic model for multiplayer video games has changed and over the years and so on and so forth. He talks at length about that, and I leave that to him. However, Downward Thrust, like I said, the sort of first video that I saw that really made me want to contribute to the conversation a little bit, he and I are sort of on a similar wavelength there. He talks mostly about RPGs and single-player games like Mass Effect, Dragon Age, The Witcher, the big games like that, and how a lot of those games, like especially The Witcher, it's a phenomenal game, don't get me wrong, it really is, it's a phenomenal game. But it suffers from some of the same problems that pretty much the vast majority of modern video games suffer, that just... Well, it doesn't mean that they suck, and I'm not going to for a second pretend that The Witcher sucks, but I'm not going to pretend that it's the perfect game either. Even though I personally, in my personal life, I know a friend who will defend his position to the death, that The Witcher... specifically The Witcher 3, is the perfect video game and that there is nothing wrong with it. And you know what? If he's happy with it, I respect that. But let's get into some of the details of what we actually mean, because I feel like when you start talking about this, it just seems really, really controversial, and then as you get into it, you realize that it's not that divisive of an opinion, even though it really seems like that when you first read the title. It's like, what do you mean modern gaming sucks? I love modern games, right? Yeah, I played modern games too, and if I really thought they all sucked, I wouldn't play them, and thus I wouldn't talk about them, and thus this video wouldn't exist. So you get the idea. It seems divisive off the get-go, but let's get into it. So, first things first, the video game industry, like I said, is now a multi-billion-dollar business, and that with it brought a series of changes. For better or worse, well, yes, both, for better and for worse. I saw another video with a smaller YouTube channel. I honestly don't remember the name, I'm sorry, but I'm going to pretty strongly disagree with it, so I don't really want to you know, I don't want to tag it and create drama unnecessarily, but basically the video said that because video games are so much more complicated and expensive, that they're better and that they're more accessible to more people, and that there's now they're out there for a wider audience and anybody can pick them up. I agree with all of that in principle, yes, but at the same time, I don't necessarily see how this makes a particular game better. To make an analogy, for example, with a movie, just because 1 million people saw it, or maybe 1 billion people saw it, doesn't mean that the movie's really good. It just means that a lot of people saw it, right? That's all it means. The quality of the product does not correlate with the amount of people that have access to it. The amount of people that liked it, enjoyed it, recommend it, definitely, don't get me wrong. But with the amount of people that can access it, no. I mean, more people have access to running water and sewage now than probably 400 or 500 years ago. Does that mean that water is now tastier or something? No. Well, yes, because of modern filtration systems and stuff and such, but that's not the point. I mean, water's still water, it's just that more people having access to it doesn't make it better, it's the same. You need it just as much as you did before, right? And same with sewage and everything. It's not about quality, it's about quantity. It's a very different topic. And I see it like in discussions here and there, often confused, like, oh, well, more people can play video games now. Okay. Does that make an individual game better or worse? No, it makes the industry bigger, but that's not what we're talking about. But what is it that we're talking about? Well, actually, here I think the best course of action would be for me to plug the video that I mentioned like 3 or 4 times now by Downward Thrust, and I think it's a 4-year-old video or something, and it's relevant as ever. And basically, it is a rather short video, and I feel like I want to add a few things about the video game industry as a whole, and perhaps look at why some of the things are the way they are. But overall, the general point of the video is a lot of the art from the older video games is lost. Games are now not as memorable, not as fun, and not as challenging in the sense of very rarely do games present a mental or mental or physical challenge for you to do. Well, I say physical, I don't mean get off your chair and do squats or push-ups or something. Rarely will they actually challenge you in a mechanical way. The way, for example, Dark Souls is challenging, right? That's very rare nowadays. Games mostly play themselves. There's a billion different quest markers, there's things showing you where to go, telling you what to say, where to click, and games just mostly play themselves. If you wander into an area that's far above your level, the game will drag you back, and it's so much more on rails compared to older games where you had freedom. Now, although these games were very differently designed from the get-go, I'm not arguing that one is necessarily superior to the other and that the other shouldn't exist, or rather that modern games shouldn't exist with their hand-holding cinematic narrative, linear corridor forced perspectives and missions and levels and gameplay. There is a place for this. There is absolutely a place for this. And often examples of this are given in AAA games like Battlefield and Call of Duty and stuff like that, where you're going to have whole sections of the game where control is taken away from the player and you're just put on rails to watch a cutscene, and the only purpose of the cutscene is for the developers to show you a cool helicopter flyby that they rendered. Now, I think I'm just pretty much straight up stealing from Downward Thrust. I apologize, but yeah, I did reference the video, so literally in the description, right? But jokes aside, It's stuff like that where the game plays itself and it will constantly take control away from you in exchange for this more cinematic narrative experience. And don't get me wrong, like I said, there's a place for that, but the problem that I feel like most of us are talking about here is that there is no alternative to that, or at least very rarely. Most games are like that, if not all of them. The Witcher, which, like I said, one of the most perfect games out there probably, still suffers from this. I want you to imagine a game, which, again, is not necessarily superior and just, you know, The Witcher 3 Plus, or The Witcher 4 or something, which is just better than The Witcher 3. No, this is just a different approach to video game design and perhaps maybe even to playing video games. I want you to imagine a Witcher video game where all of those little quests that you had to do with hunting different monsters and stuff aren't as handheld, or as hand-holdy, sorry. You're not given a quest and a quest marker to tell you, there's the lesson, that's the clue that you need to hit the right button on, and then it's going to appear out of that rock. The game doesn't tell you that. No, instead, you pick up a poster in the village, and you see that some guy called, whatever, Alvor the Blacksmith is giving a bounty to kill whatever has killed one of his family members or something. And that's it. You just read that, maybe you take it and put it in your pocket, and that's it. There's no quest updated, there's no quest marker, there's nothing. You now just have that piece of paper. And now what do you need to do? Well, if you want to do that quest, if you want to get the reward, obviously the person is called Alvor the Blacksmith, so you can maybe ask around where he lives. If you don't want to ask around, then, well, if he's a blacksmith, chances are those buildings are pretty easy to spot. Maybe go to the local blacksmith and see if that's him. Go to the local blacksmithing building and talk to people there. See if that's him, see if maybe someone knows him. Eventually you're going to find the person, ask him what happened, etc., etc., and then he tells you, well, in the nearby woods, my niece, aunt, sister, whatever, was walking, and she was murdered by something, and yada yada yada. Okay, well, still no quest marker. Local woods, he says. Well, you step out of the settlement, and lo and behold, there's woods around, but you have no idea where to go. Well, it doesn't matter, because your character has no idea where to go either. There's nothing in this corporeal realm that would tell you this is the exact position where the monster is, or this is the exact position where the attack happened. Why would you know that? All you know is what you were told, and it's up to you to go find the monster. Now, what does that create? Well, that creates a certain degree of freedom and a certain degree of challenge, and a certain degree of control, which I would argue is very pleasant and very immersive and very fun. Not to say that giving me a quest marker wouldn't make things quicker. It would. It would improve the pacing of the game. It would make the game quicker. It would let me do the quest faster and then move on to the next one and experience the next NPC's story. Yes, it would. But that's the point. Like, do you want one or the other? Do you want a maybe slower experience where you're more in control and thus finding the lesson or whatever Strigger or whatever I mentioned at the beginning? I think I said lesson. Finding it is a little bit more rewarding because I actually found the monster. I actually found the crime scene. I actually found the missing supplies or whatever the quest is, right? You actually did that. In modern games, it feels like you're told to go kill someone and there's a marker already set up. There's a convenient sniper rifle waiting for you to pick it up and shoot the guy with, or there's ammo littered all over the place, or there's all sorts of means to help you do the thing, where it gets to the point where you're not actually playing, or you're barely playing, right? That's a bit of a problem. Again, like I said, it's not the case that I'm making the argument one's better than the other. I'm making the argument that there's no alternatives left. It's all been gobbled up by the AAA industries, and the indie games that do exist have to rely on either a drastically different formula and genre video game, like Vampire Survivors, for example, or they have to conform to that. In fact, I don't know of a single video game that doesn't hold your hand all the way anymore that's come out in the last maybe 5-6 years or so. And this was confirmed. This opinion was shared in one of the comments, actually, on one of my own videos that I made recently about Dying Light, and I discussed both Dying Light games and the advantages and shortcomings of them, and so on and so forth. And one of the comments that I got, and I got a couple of upvotes as well. Mind you, my small YouTube channel, I don't get the most insane amount of views, so like it's every click matters basically, right? They got some upvotes, and the comment said, "Rest in peace, gaming industry. 1994, I think he said, to 2000 something." Now, I wouldn't agree that we can find an exact date and time as to when things started to go awry. It's never that simple in history in general, ever, right, with anything. Same in this industry, but the thing is, I genuinely feel like, because of the increase in profitability of video games and just their increase in market size and value, that a lot of stuff has been forgotten and lost. And will it ever return is hard to say. I think that's the biggest problem here. It's not that modern video games suck because we hate them all and nobody wants to play them. There's tons of really, really fun video games out there. Tons of artistic video games that people put a lot of effort in and you can enjoy. But I feel like, at the same time, although this is true, a lot of the passion behind video games is lost. A lot of the fine little details that you find in video games are lost. There's a particular YouTuber that made a point like this, and he doesn't have a channel anymore, but he was a friend of mine back in the day. We don't really talk that much anymore because we sort of went our own separate ways. He's doing his thing. I'm still on YouTube, blah, 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 but let me not meander around the point anymore. He noticed this detail in an old strategy game called Company of Heroes. And in that game, there was it's one of my favorite words in German, a Sonderkraftfahrzeug. Don't ask. Basically, I think the literal translation is vehicle for special purposes, or like a special vehicle or something like that. Basically, there was a Puma, right? Colloquially known as a Puma. In Company of Heroes, when you selected that armored car and you told it to go across some bumpy, uneven roads or up a hill or something, there was a little gas canister attached to like a metal basket, or it was put inside a metal basket on the back of the turret. That canister would jiggle left and right and bounce up and down as you were moving along uneven terrain. Juggernaut, is this a metaphor for the gaming industry? It's not really, just bear with me. I told you the video is going to be a bit lengthy. That's a tiny little detail that I am prepared to, like, completely and utterly confidently say the vast majority of players playing that game have not noticed ever. I didn't notice it until he told me. The tiny little gas can, which you can barely see, bounces around. And there's a huge variety in its movement as well, which means some poor bloke animated the bloody thing and spent a lot of time on it just to get it to look really cool when you move it up a hill or something. And I don't know how to tell you this, most of Company of Heroes was flat. And there's a couple of maps where you go uphill. In the Normandy Invasion, for example, there's a huge sort of cliff that you have to march up, but in the missions where you can see Pumas, and when they're available to you or to the enemy, they're often either going to be stationary or they're going to be moving along roads, which are pretty flat. Yeah, so a lot of those animations you would never see, probably. In multiplayer, you would, I suppose, if you were really paying attention, but people were competitive in multiplayer. You didn't have time to look around at what bounces on your tanks and armored cars. You're trying to beat the other guy, right? And here's the point. There's tiny little details like that that are products of passion. And there's entire games that are products of passion. And nowadays, it feels like, due to the way the economy of the whole industry is structured, there's no place for that anymore. It feels like you can't make a game because it's a passion project. You have to make it first and foremost to make, not to make money, not to be profitable, but to be as profitable as physically possible. And then, and only once you've achieved that, can you move on to something else. Like, art and your love for the genre and the vision you have for the game and so on and so forth. Now, some might say, well, what's wrong with that? It's games are profitable, that means that, they have to be good in order to sell well, and if they're good, then, there's going to be more details involved, or the industry is going to grow, which is ultimately going to be a good thing for the for video games and so on and so forth. And, well, it's not that simple, I don't think. And I have this is almost going to sound like a conspiracy theory, but I feel like I feel like generally it makes sense, right? If we take a look at it, I feel like that's not true because it's more economically sound and safe to create an average game, sell it, and move on to the next project than spend probably double or triple the amount of money needed to make the game to try and make it to be really memorable, excellent, and, to have no bugs and to be perfect and so on and so forth. Because there's no guarantee that it's going to work, especially if you're looking at it from the point of view of investors. There's no guarantee that if we, for example, this is going to be completely arbitrary numbers, so take them metaphorically, right? Let's say we have $1 million and we want to make a video game. And okay, so we use that million, we make a video game. It's an average 6 out of 10 video game, but it makes us $2 million. We pay tax, we pay the staff, back and money goes around back and forth. We end up making a profit of, I don't know, $100,000 or something. Okay, we've made a profit. We've paid off all the expenses. We've gotten our money back, money that we've invested into the game. We've gotten it back, and on top of that, we are up $100,000. Lovely. So we had 1 million, now we have 1.1 million to invest into the next game. Let's put it in, 1.1 million, game is again like 6 out of 10. Inflation, prices are rising, it's basically a similar game. Okay, there we go. We then make a sequel to that game, and it bombs. And now we're left with either the same amount of money as when we started, or less, and what have we done? Well, we've made 3 average games. What has our company done? Well, it made 3 games, it probably hired more people, it got bigger, it got some respect and prestige in the game world, because it made, it didn't make awesome games, but it made your Call of Duties, your FIFAs, your NBAs, and stuff like that, where a lot of people are really there for the some people are there for the gambling, some people are there for the competitive multiplayer, some people are there for this, some people are there for that. Nobody's really happy with it, but it's playable, people are buying it, it works fine. And then you make something like, what was the NBA recently that really bombed terribly? Was it 2K19, 2K20, 22? One of those NBAs bombed terribly. Nobody wanted to play it, and it was just swept under the rug. Okay, well, we just come out next year with a slightly better title, and that's it. There's very little striving for excellence. Why? Because I feel like it's safer to not invest as much time and money into making the game perfect, because there's no guarantee that it'll work. Especially from the point of view of investors, like I said. Let's take the same situation as an example. You have $1 million, and they want to make the next... Oh, what's a game that I really, really enjoyed back in the day? It's really memorable. They want to make the next Deus Ex, right? Deus Ex games, generally pretty awesome. They want to make the next Mass Effect. Not Andromeda, they want to make Mass Effect 4, right? Or they want to make... Asterix and Obelix, like the old ones. That was... Dude, Jesus, I love that game so much. Far from perfect, but it was very memorable. It was challenging. It was... it was just... there's partially a good part of this is nostalgia talking, but let's still, let's use an example, right? I want to make a sequel to that. Well, let's say we plan $1 million to make it, and we do it, and it's an average game, and we know that it's going to turn a profit, and we're like, okay, fine. What's the alternative to that? Well, the alternative to that is we, instead of the planned 1 million, we put an extra million and an extra million in there, and we have 3 million invested now, and all of a sudden, if the game turns out to be average, we're not going to be making a profit off it. So in order for us to make a profit out of it, it needs to sell really well, but there's no guarantee that the game's going to be well received and good by the time we're done making it. It's a huge risk. And I feel like the problem is the entire quality to quantity to sales to ratings issue and discussion currently revolves around nothing more than the bottom line. Video games are an art form, and art, I'm sorry to say, doesn't always go in the green or in the black, depending on where you're from, right? It doesn't always give you a net positive. Sometimes you create fascinating and phenomenal pieces of art that stand the test of time and people read and love centuries from the point of their creation. You know, your Tolstoys and Dostoevskys and your Arthur Conan Doyles and Shakespeare's and I don't know, Oscar Wilde's, which is probably one of the greatest examples to use in this conversation like this, right? Your Oscar Wilde's, where at the time they maybe didn't make as much money, though Shakespeare knew how to make money. Let me tell you that. But regardless, like some of the Russian authors are a really good example of this. Like at the time, maybe you didn't make any money, but you've made art. You've made something that isn't just your boss's bottom line and fat check. You've made something for humanity. You've told a story, and I think Quentin Tarantino, for all the controversies around him, makes a similar point in movies, and he says that one of the things that Hollywood used to be able to do back in the day was it was able to tell stories. It was able to tell stories better than anyone on the planet, and then it stopped. And then it stopped telling stories. It became about, I don't want to paraphrase him too much, I don't remember exactly what he says, but the point is, it sort of became more and more about the bottom line, and nobody really cared about the story anymore. Nobody really cared about the art. And sure enough, the movie industry is booming, right? Plenty of money to be made, but we lose something along the way. In this fixation on making the bottom line, we lose something along the way. We lose the, I have no idea how to pronounce this in English, but the French would call it, I think the anglicized pronunciation of it is l'art-pour-l'artisme, which is art for art's sake, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. I think that's roughly how the anglicized pronunciation of it would be. Stuff like that is lost, right? Yeah, stuff like that is gone. There's no more art for art's sake. There's no more video game for the sake of it being fun and memorable and enjoying. There's just video game for the sake of making the bottom line. Now, like I said, there is an advantage to this huge amount of money that's being funneled into the industry. And some will say the games are far more complex and far more intricate than they ever were before. You know, there's a lot more detail in a modern Battlefield game than there was in Banjo-Kazooie and Donkey Kong and whatever, in Treasure Island and so on and so forth. Treasure Island's the movie, Monkey Island, and stuff like that. Yeah, my throat's starting to kill me because of the lack of sleep, sorry. Let me grab some water and I'll get back to this conversation in just a second. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. And now, in typical me fashion, I'm going to get to, I guess, the most emotional part of this video for me, right around the end of it, where statistically the least amount of people are going to see it. I really should have opened with this, but yeah, never mind. I'm not arguing that modern games are terrible and that I hate them and I don't like playing them and that, yada, yada, yada. I'm really not. even though that's what titles like this suggest. But I talked about that already, I don't want to repeat myself too much. Here's my main gripe, and the main reason I think all the stuff I just talked about is a problem. First of all, the problem is there's no real alternative. It's all being crushed into the machinery. But the main issue for me is, if I think about it genuinely and objectively, I don't remember playing a game that I really, really enjoyed that I would consider modern. Right? Around the time of, for me, this was the case. People's mileage is gonna vary, but around the time of Mass Effect 3, sort of the release of Mass Effect 3, is where my memory stops, right? Not backwards, but forwards. I remember games from my childhood, I remember games from the early 2000s, I remember games from the 90s. I'm old, okay? And then, sort of after that, around that time period, let's say, roughly, I don't remember playing a video game that I really, really enjoyed, found memorable, and found worthy of going back to. The Witcher is a phenomenal narrative experience. The story of The Witcher with the different characters, and the way the story plays out differently if you talk to different characters at a different time, is phenomenal. Right? The storyline of Witcher is great. The gameplay mechanics of Witcher are fun. There's a reason it's probably going to be one of the highest rated games of all time, ever. But it suffers from the same problems, some of the same problems. And I already talked about it, but I don't really care about getting the next sword or getting the next bounty. I care about Ciri, I care about the characters there, but here's the thing. That's not a video game. Video game is something one of my colleagues wrote an entire master thesis about. This was Ars Combinatorica. Right? I apologize for the pronunciation. I have no idea how to pronounce it in English. It's from Latin, I think, and effectively it means a combination of arts. Right? For most RPGs, we care about just one thing: the story and the writing. The visuals are, well, we like it when the game looks pretty and when there's, like, cinematic angles for you to see, like nice little pictures and mountains and stuff, and then that's about it. The audio, the music in The Witcher was great also. There is a combination there. Like I said, there's a reason it's a phenomenal game. But it's more of an exception. I mean, even as an exception, it still suffers from the hand holding, the loss of control, and stuff like that. Though, admittedly, nowhere near as much as your Call of Duties and your other generic titles. But there are problems with it. But even then, even if we completely disregard all of that, there are a few exceptions to this rule. But I feel like they're just there to prove it, right? There's a few exceptions to just prove the rule. And that's about it. I genuinely don't remember video games that I really, really enjoyed and had fun with and still remember and would like to go back to playing from that time period onwards to today. I've played God of War and I've gone through it and it's cool, but I've forgotten. Honestly, here's the thing. I will forget most of it in about a year, in about 6 months maybe, and I feel like that's a problem with virtually every title, and it goes beyond just video games. I think it's the same for movies and for most other things. Especially the newer Marvel movies and even newer DC movies and stuff. They're either boring at this point, or they're just so forgettable and irrelevant and kind of just, I don't know, meh, right? And same thing with that. Like, I've played some of the really, generally considered great games that came out from, let's say, 2015 to today. And some of them were good, but none of them were really as memorable. None of them I really cared about that much. Like I said, I remember playing Rome Total War, right? The original. And I remember that this is really going to sound like back in my day, but bear with me. I remember that I didn't know how to play it. The tutorial explained some things, but you gotta understand that I didn't really have the patience to read or pay much attention to what the person in the little box in the corner of the screen was telling me. And this is just to disprove the notion that, nowadays we sort of have shorter attention spans, which I think we do, but I didn't have much of an attention span back then. I think I have a longer attention span, and I'm more focused now, but I still remember that game better. I remember I talked about it with one of my friends in school at the time, and we sort of discovered mechanics from one another. So I knew, for example, that population in cities mattered, and that if you recruited a whole bunch of garbage units, it would decrease the population of the city, and that you needed to not recruit units for a time in order to get access to better units. My friend didn't know that. He didn't know that population was affected by recruitment. He knew that it was affected by farms, I think, and stuff like that, but he didn't notice that every time you recruit stuff, your population goes down. So he recruited a whole heap of peasants, and he's like, well, I'm just recruiting these guys until I get access to the better ones. And I'm like, no, you just deprived the city of the population. He was like, oh, damn, right, yeah, you're right. And then when it came to combat, he taught me about, I think, guard mode or something else. Like, he taught me a couple of things there as well. And then my point is, I remember all of this, and it was fracking awesome, right? I remember playing Asterix and Obelix. I don't know why I grabbed that example, but it just came to mind, right? I remember some of the levels and how they were difficult and how nobody told me and gave me a quest marker or something that, go pull that lever. No, like, I would pull a lever and I would see a door open and I was like, right, well, that probably means that I'm supposed to go there or that there's something there, like a secret for me, but how the hell do I get up there? And, like, there'd be legionaries and, I don't know, testudo formation or something, like, stabbing you and so on along the way, and you had to navigate them and stuff, and it was so fun. To this day, I remember some of the dialogue and some of the characters and some of the levels. I've played Cyberpunk. I could not tell you most of the characters' names. I know V is the protagonist. I think the guy that dies at the start, spoilers. V's best friend was Jackie? Jackie, was it? I think it was Jackie. Yeah, I think it was Jackie. And then there was one of the companions whose name starts with a P. Per something, Pamela, I don't know. And that's about it. Do I remember most of the story? Not really. Do I remember the ending? Never got to the ending on YouTube, but I did play it through to the end on my end. Yeah, I remember the ending, just the last few scenes, and do I remember how I got there? Do I remember, some of the finer points of the story along the way and the quests and the side quests or anything? Nope, none of them. Nothing. Zilch. I remember none of the side quests. I just don't. Dragon Age Inquisition. What do I remember from it? One of my favourite games. Love the story. What do I remember from the story? The overall plot, the main villain, and the ending. Side quests? Nada. Okay, what about Half-Life? Ooh, yeah, some of the older games again. Black Mesa, Blue Shift. Oh yeah, I remember, dare I say, most of the dialogue lines in that game. I'm with the science team and so on. And not just the memes, but some of the actual dialogue. Half-Life 2, Episode 1, Episode 2, like, they're there as well. it just feels like games like that back in the day had more of an effect on you as a human, or rather, they had an effect on you as a human to begin with. Nowadays, I feel like that's gone. I feel like it's not there. It's not there. There's exceptions. But hell, I don't know how much I should open up about this, but I guess the whole point of the video was to open up my soul about the whole topic. But I miss, from a narrative perspective, like from a gameplay perspective, I told you what I missed. Like I don't like the hand holding. I don't like the quest markers, which doesn't mean I want to remove all the quest markers. I just want an alternative system, right? And that's from a gameplay perspective. From a story perspective, I miss games evoking some emotions in me, god damn it, right? Because what the fuck is the point of watching a movie or reading a book if you're gonna stare at it like a brain-dead NPC and toss it away and forget about it in the following week or the following few months and not care about it at all? What the fuck is the point? Like, why? Why waste your time? It's just, if it's just escapism, take a fucking nap, right? I mean, obviously you can't just nap through most of the day, but we need to, unwind and stuff, and the video games are great for that, and so are other art mediums and stuff. That's all fine and well, but my point is, we're turning away from art into pure escapism, and there's I feel like we're further and further away, and we're increasing that gap every day. I see no art in the storyline of NBA 2K, whatever the number. Does anyone remember the story of NBA? I don't. Well, I mean, I know the general story is you are a kid that ends up in the draft, you get picked by someone, you play games, you win a championship, the end. In reality, those stories had more characters. They had family members, if I remember. They had coaches and stuff like that. Does anyone remember them? No. Maybe it's not a fair example because it's not exactly a story-driven game, but even with story-driven games. Yeah. I don't know, man. It drives me nuts. It's really making me sad and depressed. Because here's the thing, like, I miss it. I miss that feeling where something happens in a video game that makes me cry. Alright? I said it, there you go. Like, hack away. The nerd has said it. I miss that. I miss the feeling I got when in Mass Effect 2, there's one of those brilliant, actually two scenes. One from Mass Effect 3, one from Mass Effect 2. In Mass Effect 2, when you go on the suicide mission, if you haven't picked if you don't have a character you've romanced in that game, but you romanced them in the previous game. Actually, I think there's is there one or two characters you can do that with? Doesn't matter. For me, it was Liara, right? The first time I was playing that image is burned in my head still. I remember, my character romanced Liara in the first game. She's not in the second game. Well, she is in the DLC, but shh. But in the base game, she's not. And when you go on the suicide mission, she's not there with you. So what your character does is he's in his room and he's thinking about the fact that he's doing something very important, and it's the fate of the universe or whatever. But that's out there, right? That's outside the cabin. That's outside the captain's quarters. Inside the captain's quarters is you, an empty bed, and the picture of your romance character from Mass Effect 1. And your character faces fucking death, right? And it feels like it has some fucking gravitas. I apologize for swearing, but it feels like it has some bloody gravitas, and that, yeah, I think I'm about to die. And this is what I'm fighting for, and this is maybe where it ends. And it bloody matters, right? It bloody matters, because that character there, your character, and then his significant other or whatever you want to call it, it's been a while since that whole dynamic has existed, because the previous game came out, like, I don't know, a year or two ago, and then you remember that, and then now it's here again, and you've almost grown up with these characters since then, right? It's been a long time since this started. And now you're like, wow, here I am. It's kind of like similar with Game of Thrones, I think, for a lot of people. A lot of us grew up with Game of Thrones if you started watching from Season 1, right? By the time we got to Season 5, a lot of time had passed, right? Years have passed, and you're like, man, I knew who Jon Snow was for years, and now I'm invested. I care about what happens to him. It's like, I hate to sound coy, but he's a part of me in some way, and I'm really invested here, and it's the same with Mass Effect. You're really invested into what's happening. And then there's a similar scene in Mass Effect 3 when you say goodbye. Except there, your character actually does die. Now, depending on, obviously, some of your choices, there is a scene in which he survives and takes a deep breath, but, yeah. We haven't seen Shepard since, so to all effects and purposes, he's dead. At least to the extent that there's no more there's no more games with him in it yet. And it's a heart-wrenching scene. It's extremely romantic and cute, but it's also soul-shattering when you realize that this might be the last time you're seeing whatever character you've romanced. It makes you feel something, right? Hey, it makes you feel something. It makes you feel alive, goddamn. It makes you feel sad. Did anyone, I mean this is a genuine question, I don't mean this sarcastically, did anyone feel anything like that playing the newest Call of Duty campaigns with cyborg women from World War II and, I don't freaking know, simping Nazis or whatever? I haven't played it, I've only seen, like, historians review those things, and I am utterly disgusted about the story and the missions and everything, but maybe that's just me. But did anyone feel anything like that? Tell you what, I played Battlefield 1, the campaign, and then there was a tank campaign with a British crew, and I remember you had to call in an airstrike on your own tank, and that was mildly sad, but yeah, that was that was about it. That's where we are. We went from thinking about, like, life and death and facing death and stuff like that to, oh no, I have to nuke my own car. Sad. And that's basically where we've gone. I'd like to bring up another exception to this, by the way. I have a lot of problems with the gameplay of Red Dead Redemption 2. I think it suffers from a lot of the problems that a lot of recent Rockstar games suffer, but I also think it is a great open world game, and I think it does a lot of things right. I think it does a lot more things better than it gets. I think it does a lot more things good than it does wrong. And a lot of the story is it's sort of here and there, right? It's great, it's okay, it's good, it goes back to being great. It's never really terrible, never really bad, but it goes up and down. The ending of that game had me... It gave me an existential crisis, right? Because it opens up a genuine sort of question within you as the player about your own mortality. Like, you see, spoilers, I'm sorry, if you haven't played the game, please turn off this video or skip the next five or so minutes. Your character is facing death, right? You're seeing Arthur Morgan draw quite literally his last breath right in front of you, pondering whether anything he did made any sense, whether any of it was worth it, right? In the end, he says John made it, and then that's worth it, right? That's something. He made it out. He's gonna live a better life. He's not. And then that's I guess more nihilism there. But ultimately, you could get a sort of sense of dread where you think that, okay, well, here's this like criminal from the Wild West, but ultimately his life ends by being backstabbed and shot and left to die in the dirt. Am I gonna fare much better? I mean, I'm gonna work my 9 to 5. I'm sorry, this is gonna be really depressing, but I'm gonna work my 9 to 5 job, and ultimately I'm gonna end up in the dirt just like Arthur Morgan, probably wondering the same thing: was any of this worth it? Yeah, I told you it's gonna get really dark. And I genuinely, like, that gave me pause for a minute, and I'm like, fuck, this isn't Arthur Morgan dying. This is the human condition of the 21st century. This is, I mean, not just of the 21st century, this is the human condition. This is us searching for meaning, right? For him, it was trying to find redemption, it's in the title, and sort of coming to peace with, I guess, coming to terms with what he's done and all of that, and I guess ultimately facing his own morality and then being afraid or not is, I guess, up to your own interpretation. Probably not. He is quite a badass, or was, but it's a deep philosophical discussion there to be had, right? It opens something up within us, and damn, it's good, right? It's good content. Pog, as the youth of the day would say. Saw that in that game, and then I mean, that still comes with a plethora of its own problems, like I said. But yeah, there's no more of that. I feel like that's a dying breed. To me, it feels like the next Red Dead Redemption game is going to be more about the multiplayer, and it's going to be probably full of virtual currency and I don't know, loot boxes or something, and eventually get ported to mobile so they can make the next Diablo out of it or something. It's, you know. If you want a best possible example of what I was talking about in terms of corporate greed ruining art, Diablo. Well, just ruining video games, really. I mean, there you go. There you go. Does need to perform well if a dozen or so wealthy people are willing to spend millions on it. Who cares? Money's money. Doesn't matter if there's 5 people playing it or 5 million people playing it. If the amount of money that they get in the bank is the same at the end of the day. It is sad. It is sad, but I guess ultimately we'll always have the older games that we also fondly remember and enjoy. And I do recommend that people go back and you guys, right? I do recommend that you go back and play some of them. A lot of us remember them with the pink glasses of nostalgia, and they seem a lot better in memory than they realistically were. But do go back and play some of the older games that you haven't. Or you haven't played in a while and don't really remember. You're going to find some really interesting things that I feel like you don't really find anywhere else anymore. Right? Even in games, it's not just about story and stuff like that, right? Even in games where there's little story. Like, there's a really old one, Return to Castle Wolfenstein. Ugh. I can still, for the life of me, I can still hear some of the noises from that game. Some of the gun sounds, the animation sounds, the electricity sounds when you... I swear to God, I have not played this game in probably, 10, 15 years, maybe. Though I think I did go back to it really quickly like maybe 5-6 years ago or so, because there was some kind of mod that came out for it. I wanted to check it out. But regardless, here's how much I remember of it. I remember the sound that Blazkowicz falling down from the ceiling makes when he ambushes the guard to escape the prison cell on the first level. And I also remember the screaming of the POW, I don't remember if it was British or American, sorry, but the Allied POW being tortured in the room next door with electricity. I remember like how his screaming sounded. I couldn't replicate it, I'm sorry. It'd be a bit embarrassing, but I remember the sound. Do I remember any of that from the last few Battlefield games? No. What do you think? No. Maybe it's just me. Look, maybe, I think this video's gone on for probably like more than an hour. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just being the sad, grumpy old mess, and I'm completely wrong, and there's all the modern video games are just as good as the older ones, and I'm just talking nonsense, basically. And if you think that, that is absolutely fine. This has been my experience of the whole thing, right? This has been how I felt, or rather how I feel, continue to feel, about the video game industry and about the way video games are designed and created nowadays. It doesn't mean that I'm right and you're wrong, or vice versa. It just means that that was my experience, and if you enjoy newer games more than the older ones, and think that there's that the bad ones are just a couple of bad examples, and that overall it's a lot better, fine. You're having fun, you're enjoying them. More power to you. I genuinely, I don't mean this I mean this without a hint of sarcasm. I genuinely am really happy for you that you can find more enjoyment than I can in modern video games, because don't get me wrong, it's really fun while you're playing it. Like, that's the thing. It's really, really fun while you're playing it, but when you're done, when you're finished with it, a couple of days later, week, month, it feels like wasted time sometimes. Not wasted, because you remember you had fun playing it, but it's not as memorable, it's not as impactful to you. It's just it's like one of those things. It's like having not a great, but having a decent meal. Like, okay, you're happy with it. Your hunger was satisfied, your need for escapism was satisfied, right? But that's about it. Like, a week from now, you're not going to remember what you ate. It's kind of like that. And video games used to, at least I feel like, again, my experience, is that they used to not be just another burger you had that tasted good. They used to be poetry, art, literature. They used to be a good book that you read, 15 years ago, and to this day you remember because you learned something from it, or it made you think about something, some aspect of your life, or, something like that. I feel like that's what it used to be. Not all of them. I'm not saying that Donkey Kong was the most philosophical video game ever, but it felt like it was moving the needle, right? Towards more art, towards innovation, towards new stuff, towards paving the way towards video games becoming a more and more beloved and more serious form of art, with new narrative, discourse, and technological capabilities to explore new themes and ask new questions and present them differently. Now it just feels like those games feel like they're the next Call of Duty, right? Just reskins. I feel like the number of remasters and the number of reworks and redones of video games and reskins and stuff kind of speak, or kind of add to the same point, right? That there's a reason they exist. That's, again, to make money, primarily, of course, but there's a reason that people want to go back to that. I think that consciously or not, I think we're still chasing after that, and that we're all acutely aware of it. It's just that maybe we don't know quite how to phrase it, maybe we don't know quite what we're looking for, but we know that there was something about those olden days of Dungeons and Dragons and Baldur's Gate and stuff like that that you can't really find nowadays. It's not there anymore. Some of the magic is gone, right? Yeah, there's some of that. There was magic in those games, and maybe part of the reason why it's lost is us. We can't see it anymore, but it's all nostalgia for us because it was more exciting back then than it is now. We've experienced more, maybe, but I still feel like when I go back to those games, the feeling's still there, and at least a lot of those games. For some, it's just mostly nostalgia. Don't get me wrong. There's sort of a utopian feel about them, where I remember everything being perfect. Yeah, no, you don't. You think everything was perfect. You remember that because it wasn't like that, but. Yeah, it's maybe that's part of the reason, but I feel like a part was also everything else that I mentioned today. Anywho, it's time to end this video. I've been making it for ages. It's way longer than it should have been, but I feel like it's important, and I really wanted to get it off my chest and just leave it on my channel for all eternity, because it's been honestly kind of weighing down heavily on me. Like, for a few years, I've been on and off sort of thinking about this, especially when I play a game that wasn't really all that great, or a game that I had fun playing, but, at the end of it, I was like, eh. I'll do a great example of that. Just one more example and I'm done, okay? A game that I had a lot of fun playing, but when I was done with it, I was like, okay. Wasn't that great. It's sort of underwhelming when you finish it, and it's like, well, fine, I guess. It's the Star Wars game, the Jedi Fallen Order. Fallen Order was really fun. It was like a Dark Souls-y Star Wars game. It was great. The level design was pretty good. The enemies were good. The boss fights were fun, and it was good. It was a good game. I think at the end of the day, if I had to rate it, to give it like a rating, I probably give it like a 8 out of 10 maybe. I had some bugs when I played it, which were highly unpleasant, and there was some issues here and there. I wouldn't give it a 9, but yeah, 8 out of 10 game. Like, great. Yeah, it was great. I never want to go back and play it again. Not because it's, like I said, it's good. It's just that I don't want to go back and play it again. I don't care much for it. And I made a point to finish the game, because at the time I noticed that it's been a embarrassingly long time since I've actually finished a video game, completed the whole thing. I was like, yeah, this one I'm gonna finish. Furthermore, you know what? I'll do you one better. I'm gonna 100% it. I'm gonna find all the collectibles, all the secrets, and I'm gonna do it. Why would you want to go back to a game that you've 100%ed? Well, I've played Fallout New Vegas probably 50 times, and I've done every quest, and I remember most of the voice lines from the bloody game. I've played San Andreas like thousands of hours when it came out, and then, thousands upon thousands of hours, and I still would go back to that game because it's freaking awesome. It doesn't matter that I remember all of the missions and everything, and I remember Big Smoke's order when he goes to the in the drive-by mission. It doesn't matter. I love it. I wouldn't want to go back to it again. This Star Wars game, just why? It's not much there for me. I mean, I've experienced it already. It leaves me kind of indifferent, That's the thing. It just leaves me kind of indifferent. Like I mentioned, maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I just enjoy video games less, but like I said, if that was the case, then I wouldn't like San Andreas nowadays either, but I do. And I would play through it again. And New Vegas and all the games like that, and Fallout 3 and stuff. So I feel like there's more to it than me just being old and grumpy, right? Tell me what you think. Tell me, I'm just am I just uttering utter nonsense, and this is all trash and stupidity, or do you think I do have a good point? I'm really interested to hear from you guys, and you have something to add, or want to talk about anything related to this topic, I do read all the comments, regardless of how many or how few there are every day. And so yeah, that's about it. Go ahead and write to me down in the comments. I really want to hear your take as well. Okay, that's about it. Thank you very much for watching. Like, subscribe down below if you enjoyed the video, and stay tuned with the rest of the content that I produce on this channel, which is considerably less rambly and considerably less, well, nostalgic and yet also a little bit depressing, shall we say. Mostly I do Let's Plays, first impressions, and stuff like that. And I'm generally in a little bit of a better mood most of the time. So, yeah, if you want to check out the rest of the channel, you just click somewhere on the screen right about now, and take you to some of my playlists or the videos on my channel. If not, then I'll see you some other time, hopefully. But whether that happens or not, regardless, please do remember to have fun, take care, and that's it. Bye-bye.